Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video, and for more bedtime stories, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I never imagined I'd end up telling this story, mostly because I'm not proud of it. There's shame in admitting how low I sank, and even more shame in admitting how close I came to never walking away. But sometimes the past claws its way out whether you want it to or not. My name is Adrian Merrick, and when I was 28, my life was at such a dead end that I started looking for companionship in the darkest corners of Craigslist. Back then, I lived in Greyhaven, Illinois, a rusted-out town that looked like it had already given up on itself years before I was born. The old steel mill had shut down, the rail station was boarded up, and Main Street had nothing but pawn shops, payday loan offices, and dive bars that smelled like stale beer and smoke. Whole blocks of houses sat empty, their windows broken, their siding warped. People who had options had left years ago. People like me stayed, scraping by, watching the town rot around us. I rented a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The walls were yellowed from cigarette smoke long before I moved in, and the radiator clanged all winter like a hammer against pipes. The smell of detergent and dryer sheets seeped under my door every night, reminding me that my life wasn't just small, it was forgettable. Work didn't help. I loaded trucks at a warehouse on the edge of town. Midnight shifts, endless pallets, boxes stacked until my back screamed. The kind of job where no one learns your name, where you clock out covered in sweat and dust and wonder how many years you can survive like this before your body gives out. My social life had collapsed too. I'd been single for over a year after my girlfriend Claire left. She told me she was tired of waiting for me to get my life together. She moved to Chicago with a man who had plans, ambition, money, all the things I didn't. After she left, my friends drifted too. I stopped answering their calls, and eventually, they stopped making them. Nights became nothing but silence, the kind that feels heavy enough to smother you. That's where Craigslist came in. It was late, after midnight, and I was lying in bed scrolling on my phone, trying to fill the emptiness with glowing screens. Out of boredom, I clicked on the men seeking women section. It was mostly junk. Fake ads, scammers, blurry photos of women I suspected weren't even real. Sad pleas from men who sounded as lonely as I was. And then I saw her. The post was short. Female 26, looking for something simple. No strings, no drama. One night only. Message me if you're serious. The attached photo was what made me stop. It wasn't a glamour shot or an Instagram model. Just a brunette woman in a black hoodie, sitting on a couch, her hair tied back. She wasn't posing, wasn't trying to look perfect. She looked normal. That was what made it believable. Her name on the post was Maris Vera. I stared at it for 10 minutes, my chest tight. I knew it was probably a bad idea. I knew I should close the app, put the phone down, and try to sleep. But loneliness makes a man reckless. Against every better judgment, I typed out a message. Me. Hey, saw your post. You still looking tonight? I expected silence. Maybe a scam reply. Instead, less than a minute later, my phone buzzed. A blue bubble appeared. Maris. Yeah. I'm free. Who's this? My pulse jumped. My thumbs trembled as I typed back. Me. I'm Adrian. 28. Clean, respectful, no drama, not looking for anything complicated. Her reply was almost instant. Maris. Good. I'm Maris, 26, just want to keep this easy. You okay with that? I hesitated, then swallowed the lump in my throat. Me. Yeah. That works for me. We chatted a bit more. She asked if I had protection. I said yes. She asked how soon I could get there. Then she sent the address. 2415 Dusk Willow Lane, last house near the woods. I read it 3 times. My stomach twisted, but I couldn't stop myself. I typed back a quick "on my way," grabbed my jacket, and left. Greyhaven at night always felt like moving through a graveyard. The streets were quiet, half lit by flickering lamps. Houses sagged into darkness, curtains drawn. Even the air felt heavier, like the town itself was holding its breath. As I drove deeper into the east side, the houses thinned out. Yards grew wilder, fences leaned, streetlights became fewer. When I turned onto Dusk Willow Lane, I felt my chest tighten. It was narrow, cracked pavement, lined with trees that leaned in as if they wanted to erase the road. At the very end of the street, right before the woods swallowed the pavement, I saw it. A small one-story house. A single porch light glowed faintly, illuminating the crooked numbers. 2415. The yard was overgrown, the grass tall, weeds curling up the steps. The siding was faded, the porch sagging. It didn't look inviting. It looked abandoned. I parked on the street and sat there staring at it, my engine humming. My gut screamed at me to leave. Instead, I picked up my phone. Me. I'm here. Which house? The reply came almost instantly. Maris. 2415. Last one. Come around back, I frowned. Me. Why the back? The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared. No answer. I sat frozen, my thumb hovering over the screen. Every instinct screamed leave, but loneliness is louder than fear. I killed the engine, pocketed my phone, and stepped into the night. The wooden gate groaned as I pushed it open. The backyard smelled of damp earth and weeds. The grass brushed my shoes as I walked slowly in. The house loomed dark, no lights on inside. Halfway across the yard, I froze. A faint creak. I tilted my head up, and my blood ran cold. Someone was watching me from the second-floor window. A shadowed figure, face obscured, standing perfectly still. The moment they realized I'd seen them, the blinds snapped shut. My phone buzzed in my hand. Maris, be right out. Just brushing up. Stay put. My pulse hammered. My palms were slick. Then came another sound, off to my right. A soft snap, like a branch breaking. Slowly, I raised my phone and flicked on the flashlight. The beam swept across the yard until it landed on the shed in the corner. Something moved. I swear I saw an arm, a pale arm, slide behind the shed, vanishing into shadow. My whole body went cold. I switched the flashlight off instantly, heart pounding, and backed toward the gate as quietly as I could. I reached for the latch, and a window above slammed open. A woman's voice shrieked into the night. Wait! Don't go. It was sharp, desperate, unhinged. I bolted. I sprinted to my car, threw the door open, and jammed the key into the ignition. As I floored it, gravel spitting from my tires, the front door of the house slammed open. A gunshot cracked through the night. The car jolted violently. My steering wheel yanked. One of my tires had blown. I didn't stop. I kept driving, sparks flying as the rim scraped the asphalt, my chest heaving with every ragged breath. I didn't pull over until I was 5 blocks away. When I finally stopped, trembling, I called roadside assistance. The repair guy showed up half an hour later. He crouched by the shredded tire, whistled, and held up a mangled piece of metal. That's a bullet, he said. Somebody shot your tire out. You're lucky as hell it didn't hit you. When the cops arrived, I told them everything. To my relief, the repair guy vouched for me, showing them the bullet. Later, I learned the truth. 3 people were arrested at that house. 1 filthy-looking woman and 2 men who matched every nightmare image of backwoods predators. They'd been using fake Craigslist ads to lure people in. The house was condemned not long after, but I still think about it. About how close I came to stepping into that backyard, never to walk out again. Even now, when I drive near Dusk Willow Lane, I swear I feel eyes on me. Sometimes I catch myself glancing at the woods, half expecting to see someone standing there waiting. It's been years, but the shame and the terror haven't faded. I know how close I came, and I know I'll never use Craigslist again. I was 8 years old when my dad brought home the first family computer. It wasn't new. In fact, it was a bulky beige desktop his office was getting rid of. the kind with a fat monitor that buzzed faintly when it warmed up. But when Dad carried it in through the front door, you'd have thought he was bringing home a newborn baby. "Careful with the cords," Mom said, wringing her hands like it might shatter if he set it down too hard. Dad just smiled, crouching at the dining table to plug it in. "This thing's tougher than it looks. You'll see." This is the future I sat on the floor, cross-legged, watching the ritual. He pressed the big square power button, and the machine hummed alive. The screen glowed with that old Windows logo, and my mom clapped softly. Dad beamed like he'd just pulled off a magic trick. "You want to try?" he asked, nodding at the chair. I scrambled up, my small fingers hovering nervously over the mouse. He opened Microsoft Paint, showed me how to draw lines and fill shapes with color. "You're painting with light," he said, voice soft, almost reverent. That stuck with me. My dad wasn't the sentimental type, but something about the computer brought it out of him. To him, it wasn't just a machine, it was a key, a door. By the time I hit 12, we'd upgraded to dial-up internet. That shrieking dial tone, the pauses, the long wait just to load a single page, it's burned into my memory. But it wasn't the sound that stayed with me. It was the way Dad's whole demeanor shifted. With the computer, he'd been excited, eager. But with the internet, he was cautious, almost fearful. "Remember," he said one night, leaning on the back of my chair while I clicked around some kid's website, "the internet's not a toy." "It's a loaded gun," I laughed. "A gun?" "Yeah," he said firmly. "Point it the wrong way, someone gets hurt." I didn't understand what he meant. To me, it was just games, goofy flash animations, chat rooms. I thought he was exaggerating, like parents always do. But as I got older, I started to realize he wasn't completely wrong. By 16, I'd learned how to sneak online after they went to bed. I'd wait until the house was quiet, the hum of the old fridge in the kitchen my only company. Then I'd click onto sites my parents had no idea existed. That's how I found Craigslist. At first, it was just curiosity. People posted about furniture, jobs, personals. But tucked away in its corners were the discussion boards. And those were what hooked me. It was like peeking into the hidden minds of strangers. Some were lonely. Some were angry. Some were unhinged. It felt raw, unfiltered. One night, while scrolling through the religion and philosophy board, I found a post titled, "The Story of Anna." The username was something generic, Watcher74. At first I thought it was some creepypasta, but the way it was written, it wasn't stylized, it wasn't dramatic. It read like a news recap, like someone documenting something that had really happened. It started with a man named Marek Havel, living in Brno, Czech Republic, back in 2007. He was a young father who'd just set up a video baby monitor to keep an eye on his infant son. One night he switched it on and froze. The feed wasn't his child. It wasn't even his house. The grainy screen showed a dim basement, and in the corner of that basement was a boy, 6, maybe 7 years old, bound and gagged. Marek panicked. He thought he was hallucinating. He turned the monitor off and on, but the image remained. The boy shifted, trying to move, eyes wide with terror. Marek called the police. The authorities deduced the signal must have crossed with another baby monitor nearby. So they canvassed the area, knocking on doors, searching for a basement that matched what Marek had described. Eventually, they arrived at the home of 2 sisters, Lenka and Ivana Vesela. They were ordinary on the surface, both in their 30s, one divorced, the other single. They lived together, raising 2 young boys, and with them was a teenage girl named Anna, 13 years old, whom Lenka had adopted. When police entered, they found the basement. They found the boy, tied up, bruised, terrified. But what chilled investigators wasn't just the abuse. It was who had orchestrated it. Not the sisters. Not even the adults in the house. It was Anna. At first, police assumed Anna was another victim, but she showed no signs of harm. The boys, however, had burns, scars, and malnutrition. When questioned, both boys claimed the punishments were fair. They said Anna told them they deserved it. The sisters, too, claimed Anna convinced them it was necessary. Neither had a history of abuse. Neighbors described them as kind, if a little odd. Yet somehow this girl had talked them into doing things they never would have imagined. Investigators dug into Anna's background. That's when the truth surfaced. She wasn't 13. She wasn't even a teenager. Her real name was Barbara Krylova, a woman in her early 30s with a rare developmental disorder that allowed her to look like a child. She had been posing as a girl to infiltrate families. By the time the authorities pieced this together, Barbara had fled. They tracked her down months later in Poland. She was posing as a 14-year-old boy, living with a family that had 2 young children. I sat at my desk that night, my heart pounding as I read. It didn't feel like a story. It felt like peeking through a window into something I wasn't supposed to see. My mom startled me when she opened the door. "You're still awake?" she asked. I minimized the screen instantly. "Homework," I lied. She frowned but didn't push. "Go to bed soon." "That stuff isn't good for your head." She didn't know how right she was. Over the years, I revisited that thread. Sometimes it was deleted, sometimes reposted with more details. Some claimed Barbara had ties to a fringe cult called the Dawn Movement, which preached about creating a child messiah. Others said that was just conspiracy nonsense. But I didn't need conspiracy theories to be unsettled. The core story was terrifying enough. A stranger had walked into people's lives pretending to be something she wasn't, and had completely rewritten their reality. The thought of it stuck with me for years. Because she was real. She had existed. And if she'd done it once, she could do it again. Now, as an adult, I think about what my dad said, that the internet is a loaded gun. He wasn't entirely wrong, but the more I reflect, the more I realize something else. The internet isn't where the monsters live, it's just the window. The monsters are already outside, and every once in a while they knock. I never thought I'd end up telling this story to anyone outside my family. For a long time, I kept it tucked away, like something you store in the attic because it's too heavy to throw out but too disturbing to keep in plain sight. Even now, years later, it still wakes me up at night sometimes, replaying in flashes. The phone calls, the drive, the arguments, the window creaking open. I was 24 when it happened. At the time, I still lived at home on our ranch in Cedar Ridge, Montana, with my mom, Laura, and my stepdad, Rick. It wasn't because I was lazy or didn't want to move out. Life on a ranch has this gravitational pull. It keeps you anchored whether you plan to or not. My dad had died when I was 12, and Rick came into our lives a few years later. He was solid in a lot of ways, dependable, hardworking, and patient with Mom's fiery temper. But he also had this flaw. He believed people's sob stories way too easily. Mom used to joke that if a stranger told Rick they needed his boots to walk home, he'd hand them over and trudge barefoot through the snow. He'd laugh at the joke, but the thing was, it was true. Our ranch wasn't big by Montana standards. We had about 120 head of cattle, a couple dozen horses, some chickens, and a pair of border collies that never seemed to tire. Most of our money came from cattle auctions and hay sales. Mom managed the finances with an iron fist while Rick handled most of the heavy labor. I pitched in with whatever was needed, fixing fences, feeding livestock, hauling supplies. Money was always tight, not desperate, but just tight enough that every purchase had to be justified. When Rick finally decided to buy a new work truck, it was a big deal. He found a decent deal on a used 2014 Chevy Silverado, sturdy enough to handle ranch life. The old truck, a dusty red 2005 Ford F-250, was still running fine though. Mom wanted to keep it as a backup. Rick disagreed. "We can get a good few thousand for it. That's money we can put toward the new loan." No sense letting it sit around, Mom frowned. "And what if the Chevy breaks down? Or gets stuck? You'll wish you had it then." But in the end, Rick's reasoning won. He listed the F-250 for sale on Craigslist. Craigslist is always a gamble. Most of the responses were the usual. Ridiculous lowball offers, people asking if he'd trade for an ATV or some guns and a purebred husky. But then, one message stood out. It was from a woman named Angela, who lived in Highwater, a rural town about 4 hours east. She claimed she was a single mom with 2 kids, working 2 jobs, and desperately needed a reliable truck. She said her old minivan was on its last legs, and she couldn't risk breaking down on the highway with her children in the back. Rick was sympathetic right away. After their first phone call, he hung up with this look on his face like he'd just spoken to someone who reminded him of a younger version of us, scraping by, trying to make ends meet. "She's the real deal," he told Mom. "You can hear it in her voice." Mom was unconvinced. "If she's serious, why won't she meet us halfway? 4 hours isn't nothing, but if you need something bad enough, you make the drive." Rick shook his head. "She said her van won't make it, and she doesn't have anyone to watch her kids. Come on, Laura. We've been in tough spots too. This truck could change things for her." Mom pursed her lips. "Or it could be a scam." That Saturday, Rick convinced Mom to follow him in the Chevy while he drove the old Ford out to Highwater. It was the middle of February. The roads were icy, the wind cut like knives, and the sky had that low, heavy look that made you feel like a storm was always just an hour away. I stayed behind to handle chores, but when they came home late that night, I knew something was wrong before they even spoke. Mom slammed the door so hard the house rattled. Rick came in behind her looking sheepish. "What happened?" I asked. Mom whipped off her gloves and threw them on the table. "What happened? Your stepdad just gave away a perfectly good truck for a check that won't clear until Tuesday." A post-dated check. Rick tried to defend himself. She was crying, Laura. She said her bank messed up her direct deposit. "It'll clear, I promise." She was embarrassed enough already, Mom shot back. "And she asked to keep the plates in our name. Who does that? Who asks for something that stupid unless they're planning trouble?" Rick's voice softened. "She's a single mom. She just wanted to make sure she could drive it until her own plates came in." Mom glared at him, her voice rising. "No. She wanted to make sure if she got pulled over, it would come back on us. And you were about to let her until I said no." Rick's face flushed. "I couldn't leave her stranded after driving all that way." Mom shook her head. "You're going to regret this. I promise you that." Of course, Tuesday came. The check bounced. When Rick called Angela, she didn't answer. He left a voicemail, then another. By the 3rd day, she finally picked up, coughing weakly. "I'm sorry," she rasped. "I'm in the hospital. Pneumonia. I swear, I'll fix this as soon as I'm discharged." Rick was silent after he hung up. For once, I saw his face harden. "That's it," he said. "We're getting the truck back." The following weekend, they borrowed a flatbed trailer and drove back to Highwater. Mom described the property later. A sagging farmhouse, weeds high enough to hide rusting appliances, a shed leaning so far it looked like a stiff wind could topple it. No one answered when they knocked, but the truck was sitting in the shed, keys still in the ignition. She wasn't even trying to hide it, Mom muttered when she told me. While Rick secured the straps, Mom scribbled a note on a scrap of paper and slid it under the front door. It read, "Thanks for nothing. Hope you enjoyed wasting our time." Rick frowned. That's not helping. But it was too late. On the drive home, Rick's phone rang. It was Angela. "You made a huge mistake," she hissed. "You think you can steal from me?" "I know exactly where you live." Rick kept his voice steady. "That was our truck. You never paid. This is over." But Angela just laughed. A bitter, broken sound. Then the line went dead. 2 nights later, I woke to my mother's scream. It wasn't a startled yelp. It was a raw, blood-curdling sound that sliced through the house like a siren. I bolted out of bed, heart hammering. As I sprinted down the hall, I saw shadows thrashing in my mom and Rick's bedroom. Angela was halfway through the window, her hair tangled, her face pale, eyes wide with madness. In her hand, she clutched a long kitchen knife that gleamed in the dim light. "Rick!" Mom screamed. Rick lunged, grabbing Angela's wrist. The knife clattered to the floor and they struggled violently. Furniture tipped, the lamp shattered, and the room filled with grunts and gasps. I rushed in, kicked the knife across the floor, and grabbed Angela's arm. Together, Rick and I shoved her back through the window. She hit the frozen ground but popped up with a scream, slamming her fists against the siding like a wild animal. "You'll be sorry," she shrieked. "I'll ruin you." Rick slammed the window shut and locked it while I dialed 911 with shaking hands. The deputies found her wandering the dirt road, still screaming threats. They hauled her off in cuffs. For weeks afterward, Mom jumped at every creak of the house. Rick walked around looking hollow, like the weight of his mistake finally hit him. One morning over coffee, he whispered, "I thought I was helping someone who needed it. I almost got us killed." Mom squeezed his hand. "You have to stop seeing people for who you want them to be. See them for who they really are." The truck sat in the yard for months, untouched, like it carried some curse. Eventually, Rick sold it to a neighbor down the road. No ads, no strangers, just a handshake. That was the last time we ever used Craigslist. I never really thought of myself as the type of person who would get wrapped up in something dangerous just by trying to save a little money. I grew up in a middle-class family, and my parents were the kind of people who never bought anything brand new unless they absolutely had to. Thrift stores, garage sales, clearance aisles, those were basically part of my childhood. By the time I was in college, looking through secondhand markets online just felt natural to me. Craigslist, OfferUp, eBay, those were like treasure hunts in my eyes. If you had the patience, you could find nearly anything you wanted for a fraction of what it cost in stores. I'd scored a decent couch, a coffee table, and even a practically new bike that way. But I never really thought too hard about who was on the other end of the deals. This was back in 2018. I had just turned 26, and I'd been living on my own for a little over a year. My apartment in Lansing, Michigan was nice enough, but honestly it was pretty bare. White walls, old beige carpet, second-hand furniture that didn't really match. It felt more like a temporary stop than a home, and I wanted to change that. One night after work, I was scrolling through Craigslist in my living room. My dinner, leftover pasta, sat untouched on the coffee table as I clicked through the listings. I wasn't really looking for anything specific, but that was the fun of it. That's when I stumbled across a post that caught my eye. The headline read, "Moving sale, home decor, candles, frames, more, $20 for everything." I clicked it, expecting to see junk. But the pictures actually looked pretty good. A big clear storage bin filled with candles, wall art, photo frames, little vases, things you'd probably pay way more for if you bought them piece by piece. My first thought was, this is exactly what I need. I messaged the seller, whose name on the listing was April. Me. "Hi. Is this still available?" April. "Yes, it is. I'm moving this weekend and just need to get rid of it. If you want it all, $20 takes everything." She even added a smiley face at the end. We went back and forth a little. She explained she was moving for a new job in Grand Rapids and didn't want to haul boxes of decorations with her. She sounded normal, polite, almost overly sweet in her texts. Me. "That sounds perfect. I can meet after work Thursday." April. "Thursday works. I get off at 6. Can you meet at the Kroger on East Saginaw? Busy and safe." That last part, busy and safe, weirdly put me at ease. It was like she anticipated my concern. By the time Thursday rolled around, I was actually looking forward to picking it up. Work dragged on, but as soon as 5 hit, I grabbed my coat and drove straight over. The Kroger lot was packed, just like she said. It was the middle of January, so the sky was already turning dark even though it was barely after 5. I parked toward the middle and texted her. Me. "Hey, I'm in a silver Honda Civic parked near the entrance. April. Great, just leaving work. Might be running a little late though. Could you meet me closer to my job? Would save me some time. I frowned at the message. That wasn't the plan. Me. Where at? April. It's just 15 minutes away at the strip mall on Willow Road. Almost everything there is closed, so it'll be easy to find me. Red Toyota SUV. Something about that rubbed me the wrong way. Why not just stick to the crowded lot we'd agreed on? Still, I didn't want to make a fuss. I told myself it was just me being paranoid. So I typed the address into my GPS and drove. The farther I went, the more uneasy I felt. Lansing wasn't a huge city, but Willow Road was an area I rarely had reason to visit. By the time I pulled into the lot, I realized just how empty it was. The strip mall was dark, all the shops closed, their windows covered with posters or security gates. Only one car sat at the far end of the lot, a red Toyota SUV. I pulled up a few spaces away and killed the engine. My breath fogged in the freezing air as I stepped out. April? I called out softly, half expecting someone to open their door. Instead, nothing happened for a moment. Then the SUV's driver's side door opened, and a man got out. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair and a thick winter jacket zipped up to his chin. "Hey," he said casually, giving me a smile. April couldn't make it. She got stuck at work, so I told her I'd meet you instead. I blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, I wasn't told that." "She probably didn't have time to text," he said quickly. "But don't worry, I've got everything right here." "Honestly, she just told me to let you take it. No charge. Free." He popped the trunk, stepped back, and motioned toward it. Something inside me clenched. My instincts screamed. The way he emphasized free felt like bait. I forced a smile, backing toward my car. "I'll just give her a quick call if that's okay." His smile faded. "No need for that. I promise. It's all good." But I was already pulling out my phone. I opened my messages, tapped her number, and hit call. A ringing sound filled the cold air. Not from my phone, from his pocket. He froze, his hand twitching toward the sound. Slowly, he pulled a phone from his coat, glanced at the screen, and ended the call. My stomach dropped. The moment he looked back up, his face had changed. No friendliness, just a flat, predatory stare. I bolted for my car. My hands shook as I yanked the door open and dove inside. "Hey, wait a second!" he shouted, rushing toward me. I jammed the key into the ignition, heart hammering. The engine roared to life just as he reached my door handle. I floored it, tires screeching across the icy pavement as I shot out of the lot. In my rearview mirror, I saw him standing there, his SUV trunk still wide open, just watching me speed away. I didn't stop driving until I was back in the glow of streetlights and traffic. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I called my sister, nearly in tears, as I told her what happened. "Call the police," she insisted. "Right now." So I did. An officer met me at a nearby gas station. I explained everything, showed him the messages. He listened, but when I finished, he sighed. "Technically, he didn't commit a crime," he said. "Pretending to be someone online isn't illegal unless money or property changes hands. But I'll file a report, just in case I sat there in disbelief." "So he just, gets away with it?" "For now," the officer said quietly. "But you did the right thing by trusting your gut. Next time, don't go to a second location." That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the moment when his phone rang, realizing just how close I came to walking toward that open trunk. To this day, I wonder what was inside it. And worse, I wonder how many people before me didn't listen to their instincts. I never imagined that a simple Craigslist ad could put my son's life in danger. Looking back, I still shudder at how close I came to losing everything that mattered to me that night. This all happened in 2002, back when Craigslist was still in its early years. If you're only familiar with Craigslist as it is now, full of shady listings, fake ads, and stories that make the evening news, you might not understand how different it felt back then. It wasn't just a marketplace, it was like an online community board, a place where people posted furniture, cars, toys, or sporting equipment they no longer needed. It was casual, almost innocent. At the time, I lived in Cedar Falls, Iowa, with my wife Lynn and our son Jacob, who was 11 years old. Our home was nothing fancy, a 2-story split level with a fading blue paint job, sitting at the end of a cul-de-sac where neighborhood kids rode bikes and tossed footballs until the streetlights flickered on. Life wasn't perfect, but it was steady, and that meant the world to me. Jacob had one obsession: hockey. Even though we lived in Iowa, not exactly hockey country, he fell in love with the sport after watching an old VHS tape of the 1996 Red Wings playoff run that my brother had mailed us. From that moment on, Jacob was hooked. He carried his hockey stick everywhere: backyard, basement, driveway. The only problem was he didn't have a net. Every day after school, he'd stand in the driveway firing a rubber ball against our garage door, pretending he was skating in overtime of the Stanley Cup Finals. Our garage door had the dents to prove it, and believe me, Lynn wasn't happy about it. "Mark," she told me one evening while we were clearing the dinner table, "if Jacob keeps using the garage door as his goal, we're going to have to replace it." I sighed. "I know. But nets cost over $200. It's not in the budget right now." Jacob, overhearing us, looked at me with those pleading eyes only kids have. "Dad, I don't need a new one. Just a used net. Anything's better than the garage." That night, after Jacob went to bed, I sat down at our bulky old Dell computer and pulled up Craigslist. I'd used it a few times before, picked up a free basketball hoop, even scored an old TV. But I'd never gone looking for sports equipment. Scrolling through the sporting goods section, I found it. Regulation size hockey goal, $50. Comes with 2 sticks and a puck. Slightly used. The post was short and plain. No picture, just a phone number. $50 was a steal. The next evening after dinner, I dialed the number. A man answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was low, gravelly, and emotionless. "Yeah? Hi, I'm calling about the hockey net you listed," I said. There was a pause. "You interested?" "Yes, very. My son plays every day. Where are you located?" "Mapleton," he replied. That was about 2 hours from Cedar Falls. I hesitated. "That's a long drive." "I can meet you halfway," he said quickly. "Rest stop off I-35 near Clear Lake. Tomorrow night work?" There was something flat in his tone, almost too flat, but I brushed it off. People on the phone didn't always sound friendly. "Tomorrow night works," I said. "How late are you thinking?" "I get off work around 9. Won't be there until after 9:30. Is that a problem?" I glanced at Jacob, who was in the living room watching TV, his stick in his lap. The thought of surprising him with a net was enough to silence any second thoughts. "No problem," I told the man. The next day dragged. At work, I found myself distracted, replaying the conversation in my head. His voice stuck with me. Too dark, too lifeless. But I kept telling myself I was overthinking it. When I got home, Jacob was buzzing with excitement. "Are we really getting the net tonight, Dad?" he asked. I nodded. "We'll take Mom's van. Only way it'll fit." Lynn frowned. "At night?" "Mark, I don't like this. Can't it wait until the weekend? At least meet during the day." I rubbed her shoulder. "It's the only time the guy's available. We'll be fine. I'll be careful." She wasn't convinced. "Take cash only. Don't give him more than you need to. And call me as soon as you're done." Looking back, I wish I'd listened to her instincts. The rest stop. By the time Jacob and I hit the highway, the sun had dipped below the horizon. The dark Iowa fields stretched endlessly on both sides, broken only by the occasional farmhouse light in the distance. "Dad?" Jacob said from the passenger seat. "Yeah, buddy? You think the net will fit in the van?" I chuckled. "Barely, but we'll make it work." We pulled into the rest stop just after 9:30. The lot was nearly empty, 3 tall light poles glowed weakly, their yellow light spreading in circles on the cracked asphalt. I parked directly under one of them. "Stay in the van," I told Jacob. "Lock the doors until I say otherwise." He nodded, gripping his stick nervously. A few minutes later, headlights appeared on the exit ramp. A dark pickup truck rolled into the lot and stopped right in front of us. I stepped out, my breath fogging in the cool night air. The driver rolled down his window. A stocky man in his late 30s with a shaved head looked me over. "You Mark?" he asked. "That's me," I said cautiously. "You got the net?" He nodded toward the road. "My buddy's bringing it in his truck. Should be here any minute." A cold weight settled in my stomach. His bed was empty. No net, no sticks, nothing. I glanced back at the van. Jacob was staring wide-eyed through the glass. I motioned for him to stay put. Moments later, 2 more sets of headlights swung into the lot. 2 pickup trucks pulled up on either side of me. My chest tightened. This wasn't right. The first man climbed out of his truck. The others followed. Big men, heavy-set and muscular, moving with purpose. They formed a loose half-circle around me. One man, bald and wearing sunglasses even at night, stepped forward. His voice was gravelly. "Where's the money?" I swallowed hard, pulled out my wallet, and handed it over. "Take it. Just don't hurt my kid." He flipped through the bills, unimpressed. "This all you got?" "It's all I brought," I stammered. "Please, let us go." He sneered, then jerked his head toward the van. "Get the boy." 2 men started toward Jacob. My heart pounded. "Stop, please," I shouted, my voice breaking. One of them smashed the van's rear window with his elbow. Jacob screamed, a sound I'll never forget, a sound that tore through me like glass. And then, by what I can only describe as a miracle, headlights appeared at the edge of the lot. A police cruiser rolled in. The escape red and blue lights flared. "Shit! Cops!" one of the men barked. Chaos erupted. They bolted for their trucks. Tires screeched. 2 trucks sped out toward the highway, engines roaring. The third tried, but the cruiser cut it off, pinning it in. Jacob was sobbing inside the van as I rushed to him. "It's okay, buddy. It's okay. You're safe." Backup arrived within minutes. Officers dragged the suspects from the truck and cuffed them under the buzzing light poles. I held Jacob close, shaking uncontrollably as I explained everything to the police. They told me the suspects quickly ratted out the others. Apparently, loyalty wasn't their strong suit. The first driver, the shaved head man, was the only one who escaped. That night, we had a police escort all the way back to Cedar Falls. Jacob clung to me in the passenger seat, silent except for the occasional hiccup of breath. In the weeks that followed, detectives contacted me several times. Most of the men were caught and faced charges ranging from attempted robbery to child endangerment. The one who got away, Dale, according to the others, was never found. Jacob had nightmares for months. He'd wake up crying, convinced men were outside his window. I sat up with him on the couch, whispering that he was safe, even when I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Craigslist didn't feel the same after that. I never went to meet a seller alone again, never after dark, and never with Jacob in the car. Years later, when Jacob went off to college, he told me, "Dad, I still think about that night sometimes, about how close it came." So do I. I don't know if that police cruiser showing up when it did was coincidence or something greater, but I do know this. Without it, I might not be here to tell this story. I never thought of myself as the kind of person who'd go looking for deals on Craigslist. Honestly, I'd always considered it kind of sketchy, the kind of site you'd hear about in a Dateline episode where someone ends up in the woods with duct tape over their mouth. But over the past few years, life had been more about cutting corners than living comfortably. I'm 34, my name's Daniel Hayes, and I've lived in Indianapolis for the past decade. I work in IT for a mid-size insurance company. The job pays all right, better than a lot of people my age get, but between student loans, condo fees, and inflation making everything feel like it's twice as expensive as it used to be, I'm always looking for ways to save money. That was how I ended up on Craigslist in the first place. It started with my condo's faucet, actually. A slow drip that turned into a steady stream overnight. My building has maintenance, but the wait time is ridiculous, and the last time I called them, they charged me triple for something I knew could have been handled with a wrench and 5 minutes of patience. Only problem? I didn't own a single tool. I grew up in the suburbs of Fort Wayne. My dad was one of those dads who could fix literally anything. Faucets, brakes, drywall, even the roof after a storm tore half of it off when I was 12. He tried teaching me, but I was always more interested in video games and computers than tightening bolts. Now living alone, I regretted it, so I figured I'd finally get myself a starter toolkit. Nothing fancy, just something that would let me handle the little stuff so I wouldn't be bleeding money every time something broke. Amazon prices shocked me, and Home Depot wasn't much better. That's when a coworker, Derek, casually mentioned, "Man, just check Craigslist. People are always unloading that kind of stuff. Divorce, moving, whatever. You'll get it for half the price, Craigslist." I remember just sitting there at my desk half laughing. "Isn't that like dangerous?" Derek shrugged. "Everything's dangerous. Just don't be stupid. Meet them in a public place, or drive out if it seems safe." That night I went home, opened my laptop and typed toolkit into Craigslist's search bar. He wasn't wrong. There were dozens of listings, some clearly overpriced, others just random bags of rusted junk. I scrolled past all of those until I found one that caught my attention. Lightly used full toolkit, drills, sockets, wrenches, $50, pickup only, call/text. The pictures showed a decent black tool bag stuffed with just about everything I'd need. It didn't look new, but it looked cared for. For $50, it was a steal. I texted the number expecting a long wait, but within 15 minutes I got a reply. "Hey, yeah, still have it. You can come by tomorrow night. Anytime after 7 works." I typed back, "Sounds good? What's the address?" The reply came with a pin drop. "Greenfield, Indiana. Here's the address." Greenfield. I had to look it up. It was only about 45 minutes east of Indy, but I'd never been out that way. Small town, population under 25,000. I almost backed out right then. But the price was too good, and I convinced myself that it was just another normal guy offloading stuff he didn't need. The next evening after work, I got in my Civic and made the drive. The further I got from the city, the quieter everything became. The sky had already gone from gold to black, the kind of darkness you only see once you're away from streetlights. Gas stations became rare. Houses looked older, more spread apart. It wasn't the middle of nowhere, but it felt like it. When Google Maps announced that I was arriving at my destination, I felt my stomach sink. The neighborhood was, if you could even call it that, a scattering of sagging houses along a narrow wooded road. Some had lights on, most didn't. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1950s. Peeling paint, collapsing porches, weeds swallowing driveways. I parked in front of the address. The house was small, 1 story, with wood siding that had turned gray from neglect. No porch light. The only illumination came from a dim lamp flickering in the front window. I sat there in my car for a moment, hands gripping the wheel. "This is fine," I muttered to myself. "Just a quick grab and go. $50. Get the tools. Leave." I grabbed the cash I had folded in my pocket, stepped out, and walked up the gravel driveway. The silence hit me first. Not just quiet, dead silent. No dogs barking. No cars passing. Not even the chirp of crickets. It was the kind of silence that made my ears ring. I knocked on the door. It creaked open a few seconds later. The man who answered looked like he'd rolled out of bed 10 minutes ago. Early 30s, maybe. Stringy brown hair that fell over his forehead, patchy beard. He wore a faded hoodie and jeans that hung loose on his frame. His eyes flicked past me like he was checking the driveway, then landed back on me. "You Daniel?" "Yeah. You're Chris?" I guessed. since that was the name listed in the ad. Mm-hmm. He stepped back. Come on in. Tools are right in the living room. Every instinct told me not to, but I walked inside anyway. The living room was dimly lit by a single lamp on an end table. The walls were bare, the furniture mismatched and worn. On the couch sat the tool bag, exactly like the pictures. I walked over, crouched down, unzipped it. The tools were all there. Wrenches, pliers, even a cordless drill. It was exactly what I needed. But my attention drifted past it, to the back door. It was broken, literally hanging from one hinge, sagging in the frame like someone had kicked it in. I straightened up, turned to hand Chris the cash, and he was gone. The living room was empty. My pulse spiked. Chris? I called. No answer. The silence pressed down again, thicker now. The old house creaked around me, floorboards shifting, walls groaning. Or maybe that wasn't the house. I swallowed hard, stepped toward the front door. I was leaving, tools or no tools. But as I entered the hallway, someone was standing there. Not Chris. This man was taller, broader, his face hidden in the shadow, but I could make out the silhouette, shoulders hunched, arms hanging heavy at his sides. "Hey," I said quickly, forcing a laugh. "I was just running out to my car to grab the money." "Be right back." No response. He didn't move. He was blocking the way. That was when I heard it. A floorboard creaking. To my right, the kitchen, pitch black. Someone was in there. My body acted before my brain did. I spun and bolted for the broken back door. The wood groaned under my weight as I shoved it open and stumbled into the night. Behind me, footsteps, heavy, fast. I sprinted around the side of the house, heart hammering, lungs burning. My Civic was in sight. But just as I reached it, someone stepped out from behind it. They didn't chase me, they didn't grab me, they just stood there for a split second, too close, too sudden, and then darted back into the darkness of the yard. I didn't stop to wonder. I dove into my car, slammed the door, jammed the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. I peeled out, gravel spitting under my tires, and didn't slow down until I hit the highway. For the next few days I couldn't shake it. Who were they? Why were there 3 of them? What would have happened if I hadn't run? I keep replaying the moment in my head, standing in that dim hallway with the taller man blocking my path. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. I know what that silence meant. It meant I wasn't supposed to leave. And if I hadn't trusted my gut in that split second, I don't think I'd be here writing this now. I never really thought much about Craigslist until after I lost my job. It was the fall of 2002, and I had just been laid off from a small office supply warehouse in Columbus, Ohio. The company had been downsizing for months, and when the manager pulled me aside to tell me that my position was being phased out, I wasn't even surprised. Still, it hit me harder than I expected. I had rent, student loan payments, and a car that was one good winter storm away from giving up on me completely. Back then, Craigslist wasn't what it is now. It was still this odd, almost underground corner of the internet. People used it for everything, selling couches, hunting for roommates, ranting about politics, or posting grainy pictures of stuff they swore was vintage. I first heard about it from a college buddy who told me you could score used electronics for dirt cheap if you knew how to negotiate. But what really hooked me wasn't the for sale section. It was the gigs, the random short-term jobs that popped up every single day. Some were totally normal, moving furniture, yard work, handing out flyers. Others were bizarre in ways that made you laugh and shake your head. I started checking it daily, partly because I needed money, partly because I was fascinated by how strange people could be. One day, I saw a post that stuck with me for years. The title was simple: Easy $100, send a text. At first, I thought it was a scam. The description was short, almost cryptic. Send one text message, get paid. No catch. Email for details. I remember staring at it, debating. $100 was a lot for me back then. Curiosity got the better of me. I emailed. Within an hour, I got a reply. Totally legit. You'll be wired money upon delivery. All you have to do is send the exact message I provide to the number I give you. It sounded ridiculous, I asked. What's the message? The guy wrote back, I see you. Just those 3 words. My stomach turned. Something about it felt wrong, like being asked to participate in a threat I didn't understand. I deleted the email, flagged the post, and moved on. But the unease stuck with me. Who was on the other end of that message? And what would it have meant to them? Craigslist had a way of planting seeds like that. Some ads were so absurd you laughed them off. Others wormed their way into your head and stayed there. For months, I kept browsing, sometimes landing easy jobs, helping an old man change smoke detector batteries, moving boxes for someone who paid me in cash and beer. But the further I went, the stranger things got. Then I saw his post. The listing read, earn $1,000, assist with medical treatment. I clicked it out of curiosity, expecting some half-baked pyramid scheme. Instead, I found myself rereading it, not sure if I should laugh or report it. The poster explained, in unnervingly casual language, that he wanted someone to come to his apartment and help him amputate his right leg below the knee. He promised to handle most of the process himself. All he needed was a spotter, someone to tie the tourniquet, hand him tools, and keep him conscious long enough to cauterize the wound. He signed off with, payment guaranteed. Serious inquiries only, I remember whispering out loud. What the hell? The email address was just as bizarre, leglessdreamer@aol.com. At first I laughed. It had to be satire. Craigslist was full of absurd humor, people posting nonsense to mess with others. The writing style was witty, self-deprecating, almost charming in its insanity. But it lingered in my mind. On impulse, I sent a short email. Whoever wrote this, your post made me laugh harder than I've laughed in weeks. Thanks for that, I figured that would be the end of it. Hours later, I got a reply. Glad you enjoyed it. But just to be clear, this isn't a joke. I'm looking for someone serious. If that's not you, no problem, I sat there, rereading it. There was no aggression, no creepiness, just sincerity. I typed back, come on. You don't actually expect me to believe this is real? Almost instantly, another reply came. Believe what you want. This is something I've planned for years. If you're not interested, I won't bother you again. It was polite, firm, and disturbingly believable. That was the beginning. His name, or at least the one he gave me, was Marcus. He lived somewhere outside of Dayton, Ohio. He claimed he'd been obsessed with amputation since childhood, tracing it back to when a high school football star in his town lost his leg in a car accident. Everyone else pitied him, Marcus wrote, but I felt jealous. He was transformed. People treated him like he'd survived something profound. I wanted that, needed it. His words unsettled me, but they also fascinated me. I should have cut contact, but instead I leaned in. I started asking questions, half out of disbelief, half because I couldn't look away. One night, sitting at my old Dell computer in my cramped apartment, I typed, "If you're serious, prove it. Show me something I regretted it the second I hit send." The next evening, his email arrived. There were 2 attachments. The first was a blurry photo of a hand. On the palm, written in marker, were the words, "Legless Dreamer, September 22nd, 2002. The pinky finger was missing. The second attachment was a video file. I clicked it before I could stop myself. The footage was shaky, grainy. A masked man sat at a kitchen table holding a pair of bolt cutters. He positioned them over his little finger, adjusted them once, then, without hesitation, snapped them shut. The screen shook as the camera toppled. The sound, sharp, wet, final, made my stomach lurch. I slammed my laptop shut, heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't fake. I knew it wasn't fake. After that, my emails to Marcus became compulsive. I told myself it was out of curiosity, maybe even concern. But deep down, I knew it was darker than that. I was hooked. We wrote back and forth for weeks. He told me stories of others in what he called the body integrity community, people who felt they were living in the wrong body, desperate to rid themselves of parts that didn't belong. Some froze their limbs until hospitals had no choice but to amputate. Others mutilated themselves beyond repair. They're not crazy, Marcus insisted in one email. They're just chasing the version of themselves that feels real. I didn't know whether to argue, pity him, or fear him. Sometimes his words felt almost normal. He told me about volunteering at a food pantry, about his mother's cooking, about how he loved the smell of autumn leaves after rain. He wasn't some cartoon villain. He was disturbingly human, and that made it worse. The last email I ever got from him read, "Today's the day. I found someone willing to help. Don't worry, I've prepared for this. I'll send an update soon." I never heard from him again. At first, I checked my inbox every hour, refreshing obsessively. Days passed, then weeks. The silence became unbearable. I sent desperate follow-ups. "Did it go okay? Just let me know you're alive. Marcus, please." Nothing. Months later, I'd lie awake at night replaying his words, the video, that calm politeness in his tone. Sometimes I convinced myself he'd gone through with it and survived, living quietly somewhere, finally content. Other times, darker thoughts crept in. Maybe he bled out on a bathroom floor. Maybe his helper wasn't prepared. Maybe his obsession killed him. The not knowing gnawed at me more than anything. It's been over 20 years, and I still sometimes think about Marcus, about how easy it was to stumble into someone else's darkness on a website that felt like a digital flea market. Craigslist was full of couches, cars, free kittens, but it also hid people like him. People chasing something most of us can't even begin to understand. I still wonder if his final words were true, that he'd finally done it, that he'd found his version of peace. But I'll never know, and maybe that's the real horror. I never thought moving across the country would change my life in the way it did. Not in the way I'd hoped, at least. When I accepted the promotion that pulled me from Arizona to Colorado, I envisioned a new chapter, a bigger paycheck, new opportunities, maybe even new friends. But what I got instead was a lesson I'll never forget, one that taught me how vulnerable we all really are when we let the wrong person into our lives. My name is Callan Pierce, and this is what happened to me. Leaving Tucson wasn't easy. I'd lived there my whole life, 32 years in the same desert city, close to family, familiar streets, and routines I could navigate blindfolded. When my company announced they were expanding a new branch office in northern Colorado, they offered me a managerial position. It meant doubling my salary, more authority, a chance to move up even further. It also meant uprooting my life. I told myself it was worth it. My mom cried when I packed. My brother told me I was crazy to leave, but I shrugged it off with the confidence that comes with believing you've made the adult choice. The drive took 2 long days, and when I finally pulled into Ashford Ridge, it was nothing like Tucson. The air was sharper, the sky seemed closer somehow, and mountains loomed at the edge of the horizon. The townhouse I bought wasn't big, but it was new enough to feel clean and safe. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, beige carpet, and a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. But it was empty. I'd sold almost all my furniture before moving. My old couch was falling apart, my dresser's drawers stuck, and I figured it wasn't worth the trouble of hauling it all across states. That decision came back to haunt me my first night there. I remember unlocking the front door, carrying in my last box, and standing in the hollow living room. Every step I took echoed. My mattress was propped against the wall upstairs, but beyond that, the place was bare. The silence was suffocating. At first, I told myself it was temporary. I'd get furniture soon. But every day I came home from work, the emptiness wore me down more. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a shell. That's when I turned to Craigslist. I'd used it years earlier, picked up a used desk, a coffee table, even an old guitar once, but I never relied on it. Still, it seemed like the cheapest and fastest way to fill my place without going broke. The first couple of weeks went fine. I found a nightstand from a retired couple. They were sweet, even offered me lemonade when I came by. A coffee table from a young guy moving to another state. A lamp from a college student who just wanted beer money. Every single experience was normal, easy, friendly even. And with each pickup, I felt more comfortable. My caution slipped piece by piece. Then one night after work, while scrolling through listings on my phone, I saw it. Gray sectional sofa, $200, must go this week. The picture was a little grainy, but good enough to see that it was exactly what I wanted. Clean lines, modern style, barely looked used. And $200? That was a steal. I sent a text immediately. Me. Hi, is the sectional still available? Seller. Yeah, still have it. You interested? Me. Definitely. Only issue is I just have an SUV. Might take a couple trips to move it. Seller. That's no problem. I've got a truck. I can bring it to you if you want. Easier that way. The guy introduced himself as Bryce Halden. His messages were short, polite, straightforward. Nothing weird. Honestly, he seemed like just another person trying to offload furniture quickly. Part of me hesitated at the idea of giving a stranger my address, but another part reminded me how inconvenient it would be to make multiple trips. This was the simple solution. We set it up for the next day, 6 p.m. The following morning, before leaving for work, I sent him my address. He replied right away. Got it. See you at 6. All day at the office, I felt strangely excited. Finally, my living room would start looking like a real home. By 5:45, I was home, blinds tilted halfway open, TV murmuring in the background. I paced a little, anxious for him to arrive. At exactly 6 o'clock, headlights slid down the street. I peeked out. A black pickup truck rolled slowly past, but my heart sank. The bed of the truck was empty, no sectional, not even tie-down straps. The truck reached the end of the street, turned, and crawled back. This time, it slowed directly in front of my house. I ducked slightly behind the blinds, unease prickling my skin. Whoever was inside lingered, looking, or at least that's what it felt like, before rolling away. I pulled out my phone. Me. Hey, was that you? Thought I saw your truck drive by delivered. No reply. 10 minutes later, I tried again. Me. Still on your way? That one didn't even deliver. Frustration replaced unease. Maybe he sold it to someone else. Maybe he was flaking. It happened all the time on Craigslist. By 7 o'clock, I gave up. I reheated leftovers, carried my laptop upstairs, and tried to shrug it off. At least, that's what I thought I did. I woke at 2:17 a.m. to a sound that rooted me in terror. The front door creaking open. It had a very distinct groan, one I'd noticed since moving in. I sat up, heart thudding. Slow, deliberate footsteps pressed against the tile downstairs. Each step echoed, careful and steady. Then a voice. Callan. Deep. Flat. Emotionless. My blood froze. He said my name again. Callan. I didn't recognize it. Not a neighbor, not a coworker, no one I'd ever heard before. The footsteps stopped at the base of the stairs. I dialed 911 with trembling fingers, whispering into the phone. There's someone in my house. He broke in. He knows my name. The dispatcher urged me to stay calm, stay hidden. Officers were on the way. Downstairs, the voice called again. Callan. I crawled into the closet, clutching the phone so hard my knuckles ached. My heart pounded so loudly I thought he'd hear it. Then, silence. The voice stopped. The footsteps faded. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, flashing red and blue lights spilled across my blinds. Police swept the house. No one was there, but the front door's lock had been picked clean. I explained everything: the Craigslist post, the truck circling, the texts, showed them my phone. but the number was already dead, disconnected, a burner, no way to trace him. That night, I replaced the locks, installed cameras, double-checked every window, but sleep never came easy again. Even now, months later, I can still hear the voice, the way he said my name, not rushed, not angry, just certain, like he already knew exactly where I was, and maybe worse, what he planned to do. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd end up writing a story like this. For most of my 20s, my life was painfully ordinary work. Rent, groceries, bills, the same routine over and over again. But if there was one thing that made my days feel a little brighter, it was dogs. I grew up in a house where my parents were allergic, so I never got the chance to have one as a kid. As soon as I moved out and got my first real place, I promised myself that one day, when I was financially stable enough, I'd finally adopt a dog. By the time I was 23, I was living in a one-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city called Brenton, tucked about 45 minutes from Chicago. It wasn't glamorous. The carpet was worn down, the fridge rattled when it ran, and my upstairs neighbor seemed to think 2 in the morning was the perfect time to start vacuuming. But it was mine. I shared it with my boyfriend, Ryan, who I'd been with for a little over 6 months at the time. He was my first serious relationship, the kind where you start daydreaming about marriage, kids, a future together. And that was what led me to say the words one Saturday morning in March. "Ryan, what if we adopted a puppy?" He was half asleep on the couch, hair sticking up in every direction, scrolling through his phone. At first he laughed, but when he saw how serious I was, his expression softened. "You really want one?" he asked. "I've always wanted one," I said. "And honestly, I think it could be good for us. Like a trial run. See if we're ready for, bigger responsibilities down the line." Ryan smirked. "So you mean a trial run for kids?" "Exactly," I grinned. 2 weeks later, we were driving home from the Brenton Animal Shelter with a wriggling Jack Russell Terrier puppy in my lap. He had bright brown eyes, oversized ears, and more energy than either of us knew how to handle. We named him Oscar. From the moment Oscar set his little paws inside our apartment, everything changed. The once quiet place was now filled with barks, the sound of nails clicking across the linoleum, squeaky toys being destroyed in record time, and yes, tiny accidents on the carpet. But even with the mess, we loved him instantly. Oscar became our little family. Every day after work, I'd come home, drop my bag, and immediately hear the thundering of his paws racing toward the door. Ryan loved to roughhouse with him, holding up toys just high enough that Oscar would jump like a little acrobat. And at night, Oscar curled between us, snoring softly, making the bed feel fuller and warmer. But Oscar had one flaw: the dumpsters out back. Behind our apartment complex was a row of dented, overflowing dumpsters that attracted rats. Lots of them. It was disgusting, but since our unit was on the ground floor, we passed them daily during potty training walks. And every single time, Oscar would lose his mind. He'd growl, bark, lunge against the leash. It was like the scent flipped a switch in him, awakening some deep hunting instinct he couldn't suppress. The first time he actually saw one of the rats, things got worse. He nearly yanked the leash out of my hands, chasing after it, throwing himself at the wooden fence that separated the dumpster area from the highway beyond. Ryan and I exchanged a look that day, silently agreeing we'd have to avoid the back lot from then on. But fate had other plans. It happened one Friday night in June. Ryan went out with friends and came back sometime after midnight, drunk. I didn't hear him come in. I was already asleep. But when I woke up the next morning, the apartment felt wrong. Too quiet. I walked into the living room and saw the back door cracked open. "Ryan," I said sharply, shaking him awake. "Where's Oscar?" "What?" His voice was groggy. The door was open. "Where is he?" The color drained from his face as the realization hit him. He bolted upright, searching the apartment. We tore through every room, every closet, every corner. Nothing. Oscar was gone. I can't even put into words what that did to me. My chest felt like it had caved in. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't look at Ryan without wanting to scream. For hours we searched the neighborhood, shouting Oscar's name, shaking treat bags, showing his photo to strangers on the street. We taped up missing posters on light poles and near bus stops. Ryan, desperate to make up for his mistake, even posted on Craigslist under the pets section. Lost dog, reward offered, small Jack Russell Terrier named Oscar, last seen near Brenton Apartments. Please help us bring him home. The first 24 hours were unbearable. I kept asking Ryan every 10 minutes if anyone had replied to the Craigslist post. He kept checking, refreshing. Nothing. By the second night, I'd given up hope. Missing pet stories rarely ended well, and though Ryan wouldn't say it out loud, I could tell he thought the same. Then, on the third day, we got an email. It read, "Hi. I found a small dog wandering near the highway 2 nights ago. I picked him up, took him home, and a friend told me about your Craigslist post. I checked the photo. It's definitely the same dog." He even responds to, "Oscar. I've been feeding him chicken and taking him for short walks on a rope leash. Here's my number if you want to arrange pickup." I couldn't believe it. Relief flooded through me so hard I started crying. Ryan called the number immediately. A man answered. His voice was older, gravelly, but friendly. He confirmed everything in the email. Oscar was safe, in his care. He lived in the south side of Brenton, a rougher area. "Don't worry," he said, chuckling. "Oscar's been in my basement nice and cool. He's safe here until you pick him up." The word basement gave Ryan pause. "Why keep him down there?" Ryan asked after hanging up. "Because maybe the guy doesn't want his house trashed," I said. "Oscar isn't fully trained. It makes sense." Ryan didn't look convinced, but he didn't fight me on it. We agreed to pick Oscar up later that afternoon. The neighborhood grew worse the deeper we drove. Houses with peeling paint, boarded up windows, overgrown lawns. My phone insisted we were headed the right way, but I silently prayed it was wrong. Finally, we pulled up in front of a sagging 2-story house. The porch light flickered even though it was daytime. Standing in the doorway was a man in a flannel shirt and jeans. He waved at us, smiling with crooked teeth. "You must be here for Oscar," he called out. I wanted to run to him, to scoop Oscar up and never let him go. But the second we stepped onto the porch, the smell hit me. Mildew. Rot. "He's downstairs," the man said, motioning inside. Ryan stiffened beside me. "Could you bring him up?" he asked. The man's smile faltered. "He's right down there. Won't take a minute." "We'd rather wait out here," Ryan said firmly. The man's eyes darkened. His voice turned flat. "Suit yourselves." He disappeared inside, leaving the door open. Minutes passed. Too many minutes. "Something's wrong," Ryan whispered. "We should go. We can't just..." I started, but then the man reappeared in the doorway. His friendliness was gone. His expression was blank, almost cold. "You're not coming in?" he asked. "No," Ryan said. His tone was sharp now. "We'll wait out here." The man stared at us for a long moment. Then he said, too casually, "Your loss." We turned and walked back to the car. My hands shook as I fumbled with the door handle. The man watched us in silence until we drove away. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every second, the smell, the look in his eyes, the way his tone shifted. The next morning, I looked up the address. My stomach dropped. The house had been foreclosed years ago. It wasn't supposed to be occupied. I called the police. They sent a patrol car. Hours later, an officer called back. His voice was clipped, almost guarded. "We checked the property," he said. "You and your boyfriend are very lucky you didn't go inside." I asked what they found. He wouldn't say, just repeated, "You were lucky." We never saw Oscar again. Sometimes, late at night, when the apartment feels too quiet, I think about that man standing in the doorway, about what was waiting in that basement, about what would have happened if Ryan hadn't insisted we stay outside, and I wonder how many others weren't as lucky as us. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to look for something like love or even just companionship online. But I guess, if I'm being honest, loneliness has a way of pushing you into corners you'd never expect to end up in. It had been about a year since my long-term girlfriend, Clara, left me. We'd been together since college, almost 5 years, and I was convinced we'd end up married. But real life has a way of tearing apart the fairy tale plans you make when you're young and starry-eyed. She'd gotten a job offer in another state, something she said she couldn't pass up. I told her we could make it work long distance. She said she wasn't sure she wanted to. That conversation was the last time I saw her in person. Since then, I'd thrown myself into work. I was 29, living in a small apartment outside of Dayton, Ohio, working at a logistics company where the days bled together into an endless cycle of fluorescent lights, warehouse dust, and late-night takeout. I had friends, but most of them were married now, or busy with kids. Nights got long and quiet, too quiet. So when I stumbled onto Craigslist's personal ads one evening, it wasn't because I was desperate. At least, that's what I told myself. I was just curious. That was all. Most of the ads were exactly what I expected. Spammy nonsense, fake-looking profiles, or overly aggressive propositions that made my skin crawl. But after about 10 minutes of scrolling, one caught my eye. It was short, simple, almost casual. Just broke up, not looking for anything serious. Something fun, no strings, message me if interested. There was a photo attached. A girl sitting on the edge of a bed, smiling at the camera like she'd just been caught mid-laugh. Her hair was auburn, her eyes green, and she had that kind of beauty that felt intimidating, like the sort of woman I'd expect to walk past me without a second glance in real life. Yeah, right, I muttered to myself. But still, I clicked reply. My message was short and awkward. Something like, "Hey, I'm Nate. Saw your post. If you're serious, maybe we could talk." I didn't expect a response. Not really. But less than 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Her, "Hey Nate. Yeah, I'm serious. Just want something simple." I stared at the screen. My pulse picked up. It felt too easy, too fast. We went back and forth for a while. She told me her name was Lena, that she lived about 20 minutes outside the city, and that she'd just broken up with her boyfriend who'd been an asshole. She wasn't looking for commitment, just a way to distract herself. Then, after only a few messages, she sent a photo. Not just the kind you'd post on Facebook, a provocative one. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, nearly dropping my phone. I sat there, my thumb hovering over the screen, my brain screaming, "This is a scam, this is a setup." But the pit of my stomach told me something else. What if it's not? I decided to test her. Half joking, I typed, "If this is real, send me a picture holding a paper with my name on it." I didn't expect her to actually do it. But not even 10 minutes later, another photo came through. Lena, sitting cross-legged on her bed, holding up a notebook. On it, written in bold black marker, I slept in his arms. I felt my throat go dry under my skin. Over the next hour, we talked more. The artist, she told me she lived in a quiet neighborhood on my apartment and brushed my hand every time she was free to inside of his forehead. At first, she didn't want to chest tightened. "Come over." His phone finally was during dinner for that, and each time he marked his face down. I'll text you the address. Marcus smiled. His eye hesitated towards the door. My gut told me the door sounded insane. That was the night I was new to the restaurant. Crack of lights. At first, I didn't even know if I was imagining his jacket. Then there was faint voice told myself I was this time. Marcus shimmered away. After dinner, he insisted on driving me home. His face was twisted. I hesitated between her voice and my heart pounding. Before I could say something, he lunged. I just wanted to make sure she had hair on my arm. Number one, I agreed. And met Rowan. I should my ride started fine. Forcing a laugh. Struggle was violent. Nothing weather and cologne. It's not every day I do this. Stop. I scrambled off the bed, little clutching more urge around, especially when Rowan stepped away to my house. I don't too close. I can't just come over expecting I'll be waiting. Poured wine, but what came out was a whisper hissed clear as day. My keys before I could talk myself out of it. She should have died every day on my body. Still shattered in my phone. What the wine and Tuesday along from the hallway. Marcus grabbed my wrist. Don't trust kids like get out against porch fighting more by instinct. Sluggish and cold. Though Rowan was iron. Her house was at strength as street clenched. With a eyes forward, Marcus could my hands shook as I dark blurred into my part. Actually, I couldn't escape. Can you stop here? dialed her number into obligation from a friend's place. I tried again, dropped the knife, his whispers always the whispers. I muttered, he reached almost there, and sometimes stopped the car, pulled out her full-time glancing whether she and threw a standing glance at then curiosity hands, or maybe stubborn as I was of me. His smile snapped. The gravel crunched into my hand and shoved the door open. The car slowed. That's when I saw them. They wouldn't believe me. I tumbled over the voice standing in the front. My father just a man. They weren't trying hard to get out of my chest. They just stood there. Sometimes shoulder to shoulder was gone. I followed him with disbelief. One was left on the shirt head side. I stumbled on his voice unusually. Every step feeling the other was thinner of me. Just wearing outside school with tattoos. His chest crawled up his arms. Like I saw me no existence. My stomach dropped. He cut me off. My mother. Every you don't understand. Screamed that this is the night. I wanted to ask how everything changes. How I brain how do you have these? Tell me everything's darker than maybe Lena's roommate. Shadow turning maybe her brothers. Eyes full of table again. I was burned this time. There was only just stared. I deleted my account. Things like pulling out the camera. I stared at my reflection in my mirror for a long time. Aren't you eating? I tried to leave easily. The door shut. I already had barely escaped. I don't know what Daniel's mother went into hiding. My heart hammered. Don't find I thought I might pass out. Something worse. I peeled out of the drink. I know why his breath cold against my cheek. Stopped glancing at the reason. I know why I chose. And sometimes headlights to appear. Previous neighbors on the ones usually stayed wiser. When I got home, I tried to calm down. Because you saw yourself, it was just a human joke. They pretend targeted because of me. He touched my chest. We have to leave. Right over my heart. That was my boyfriend. We were just messing with you from the table, stumbling. I stared at she's waiting for us. Anger, waiting to go. Fear. His hand shot out, hit me, grabbing my wrist again. So much for the remote. Harder this time. Right off their radar. I tried to brush it off. We can be a family. Tried to laugh it away. Bleeding, my legs trembled. Something gnawed at me. Just like entire life. Something about the way Jasmine looked at yanking free. But when I thought about later, you're not real. The local news wrapped his head, seeping into my sheets. Man had been lured. I realized I had no choice by a Craigslist. The whispers rose. 2 men ambushed him. Run. Beat anything I could. Robbed him. Slamming the front door in the driveway. He was telling the truth. He survived into his car. Into the night. As we drove into the night, my lungs burned. City lights fading. Shit matched exactly where I stop until I reached the main road on my couch. My hands shook as I began to write. The house was dark, my chest every silent. If I had not noticed I wasn't in my window, I still hear. If I had taken 2 more steps off that driveway in the shadows, I might not be sitting here right now. Stretched endlessly ahead, he whispered in me for a life I never asked for. But now I had no choice but to leave. They weren't bored, and sometimes they were predators. When I wake in the middle of the night, and I was one careless decision away from being their victim. Watching, I can still see their faces in my mind sometimes. Still feel the way they stared at me. And the worst part? That ad disappeared the next day. But who's to say another one didn't pop up in its place? Who's to say they're not still out there, waiting for the next Nate to take the bait? I never thought I'd be the type of person to browse Craigslist personals. But back then, in 2014, I was lonely in a way that felt heavy. My name is Evan Mercer. And at the time I had just moved to Dayton, Ohio for a new job. I didn't know anyone in the city. My days were spent in a bland office and my nights in a small, dimly lit 1-bedroom apartment where the silence pressed on me like a weight. After a few weeks, I realized I needed to put myself out there somehow. Bars weren't my thing, and online dating apps always felt like a meat market, people swiping left and right without even reading what you wrote. Craigslist, though? It seemed old-fashioned in a weird way, like posting a flyer on a corkboard. People who used it had to actually type something out, which made it feel a little more genuine. That's how I found Marcus's ad. It was simple, almost awkward, which made it stand out from the usual sleazy stuff. Looking for someone to grab a drink with, laugh a little, and see where it goes. Nothing complicated, just 2 people enjoying a night out. Send me an email if you're interested. No shirtless selfies, no long demands, just a few lines that felt human. I stared at the ad for a long while before drafting a reply. I told him I was new in town, that I worked in accounting, and that I liked bad jokes and cheap beer. Within an hour, I got a response. His writing style was casual but warm. He cracked a joke about accountants being spreadsheets with legs that actually made me laugh out loud. We traded emails for the next week. He was funny, thoughtful, a little rough around the edges in the way he phrased things, but never unkind. I felt safe enough to meet him. We picked O'Malley's Pub, a noisy Irish-style bar near downtown. The Friday crowd was spilling out onto the sidewalk, music vibrating through the walls. But once inside, we managed to find a quieter booth near the back. When Marcus walked in, He didn't look like the type I usually went for: tall, broad shoulders, a little scruffy with messy dark hair, but the moment he smiled, I relaxed. He was magnetic in person. "Evan?" he asked, sliding into the booth. "Yeah, you must be Marcus." "So, good guess," he said with a grin. From there, the conversation flowed. He asked questions, listened closely, and had a way of leaning forward when I spoke that made me feel like the only person in the room. I caught myself laughing more than I had in months. "You're way easier to talk to than I expected," I admitted after my second beer. "Same," he said. "Most people online either sound fake or like they're trying too hard. You're just normal, in a good way." The night stretched on. At one point he suggested we head to a nearby pool hall, just to keep the night alive. "Come on," he urged. "I'll even let you win a game." I laughed. "You're on, but I'm driving, so don't try anything funny." He held up his hands in mock surrender. Scout's honor. The pool hall was dim, lit with neon signs and the clack of billiard balls. We ordered another round and played a few games. To my surprise, I was winning, which made him groan dramatically. "You're hustling me," he accused, leaning on his cue stick. "I swear I'm not," I said, laughing. That's when his phone buzzed. It sat on the edge of the table, screen lighting up. He glanced at it, and his entire demeanor shifted. His smile faded, his shoulders tensed. I noticed. "Bad news?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sighed, set the cue down, and rubbed his hands over his face. "Look," he finally said, his tone suddenly heavy. "I should probably tell you something." A knot formed in my stomach. "Okay. I just got out of prison," he said flatly. "Couple months ago. I'm a convicted felon." I blinked, trying to process. "For what?" "Stupid shit when I was younger. Fighting, breaking and entering. Drugs. I've been trying to start fresh." He met my eyes. "I didn't want to hide it from you, but I also didn't want to scare you off before you even knew me." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to get up and leave, but another part of me, maybe the part that hated confrontation, just sat there, frozen. "And one more thing," he added, almost casually. "I live with my girlfriend right now. It's not serious, more of a situation, until I get on my feet." My throat went dry. "Wait, you live with your girlfriend?" "Yeah, but it's not what you think." He gestured to the phone on the table. "That text just now, it's from her. She saw us at the bar earlier." My blood ran cold. "She was there?" "Yeah, guess she followed me." He said it like it was no big deal, but his jaw was tight. I wanted out. Everything about the night had flipped from fun to suffocating, but I'd driven us here. I couldn't just leave him stranded. "Let's get you back to your car," I said, forcing calm into my voice. The silence in my car was thick at first. He sat slouched in the passenger seat, staring out the window. Then, without warning, he started to cry. At first, it was quiet, just sniffling. Then it grew louder, jagged, until he was sobbing. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I screw everything up. I ruin everything good." I gripped the wheel tighter. "Marcus, it's fine. We'll just get you back to your car." "No, it's not fine." He slammed his fist against his thigh. "You don't understand. I try to be better and I keep fucking up. She's gonna leave me. Everyone leaves me." I didn't know what to say. My heart raced, my mind spiraling. Then his hand shot out and grabbed the car door handle. "What are you doing?" I shouted. "I can't do this," he sobbed, tugging at the handle. "Marcus, stop, we're on the goddamn highway." I hit the child lock so fast my hands shook. My stomach churned with panic. If he opened that door, both of us were dead. "Please just sit back," I begged, my voice cracking. "We're almost there. Just hold on." He slumped back, still sobbing, his words slurred and broken. I kept my eyes on the road, praying he wouldn't lunge again. The 10-minute drive felt like an hour. When we finally pulled into the bar's parking lot, I threw the car in park. "There," I said sharply. "Your car's right there." He wiped his face, muttered something I couldn't make out, and stumbled out of my car. I didn't wait. I sped off, hands trembling, heart pounding. I thought that was the end of it, but 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "This is Anna. I'm Marcus's girlfriend. I know you saw him the other night." Attached were photos of her face bruised, swollen. Her lips split open. My stomach dropped. She told me he'd beaten her after confronting him about me. She wrote paragraph after paragraph, detailing how he'd isolated her, controlled her, and hurt her for years. I felt sick. The man who made me laugh, who leaned forward like he cared about every word I said, he was a violent monster behind closed doors. I kept messaging with Anna, partly out of guilt, partly because I couldn't believe what I'd almost stepped into. She told me stories that left me trembling. Nights where he'd locked her in the bedroom, times when he'd broken her phone so she couldn't call anyone. The way he always cried and begged after hitting her. Eventually, she left him. She moved in with her sister, filed for a restraining order, and strangely, through those long, heavy conversations, we became friends. Sometimes I think about that night, about how easily it could have been me, about how quickly someone can shift from charming to terrifying. It changed me. I don't browse Craigslist anymore. I don't ignore red flags. And I've learned that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't hiding in the dark. They're sitting across from you at a bar, making you laugh, making you feel seen, until the mask slips. That night could have ended so much worse, and I'll never forget it. I was 22 when this happened, and sometimes I think about how close I came to not being here at all. Back then, I was still living with my parents in a small house on the outskirts of Ashbrook, a cold little town tucked up against the edge of the Midwest. Winters there were brutal roads slick with ice, power flickering out during storms, and long weeks of isolation when snow piled up against the doors. I didn't have much going for me at the time. I was working part-time at a shipping warehouse, barely scraping together enough money to pay for gas and the few bills my parents asked me to help cover. Video games had always been my escape. I grew up on them, ever since my dad brought home our first clunky desktop computer and let me mess around on MS Paint. My PlayStation 3 was my lifeline during those nights when I didn't want to think about how empty my life felt. But then my little cousin visited for Christmas break. He was 8, careless in that way only kids can be. One slip of his hand, one bottle of Mountain Dew tipping over on my console, and just like that, fried, gone. I was furious, but more than that, I was empty. Suddenly, the one thing that got me through long shifts and cold nights was just a dead hunk of plastic. That's how I ended up on Craigslist. It was December, a few days before New Year's, and Ashbrook was buried under a thick blanket of snow. I remember sitting on my bed, scrolling through the for sale section, half distracted, half desperate. Most listings were overpriced or outright scams. Then I saw it. PlayStation 3. $120. Good condition. Need gone. As soon as possible. The description was short. Works fine. Comes with one controller. Just need the money quick. First come, first serve. Something about it hooked me. It was simple. No fluff. No attempt at sounding slick. The price was low, but not absurdly low. Just enough to make me think the guy might really need quick cash. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the reply button. My parents had always warned me about Craigslist, about shady deals in parking lots and people who weren't what they claimed to be. But I told myself I'd be smart. I'd see the PlayStation first. If it worked, I'd hand over the money. If not, I'd leave. Easy. So I texted the number. The reply came almost instantly. Seller. Hey, yeah, I still have it. You want to meet tonight? Me. Depends. Where? Seller. Old Hillside Mall lot. Kmart side. Around 8? Bring cash. I don't want to sit freezing all night. The Hillside Mall. That place had been abandoned for years. Half the stores were boarded up, graffiti painted across the walls, parking lot cracked with weeds and empty except for kids who sometimes hung out there at night. It was the kind of place you'd pass by and think, man, that's depressing. A knot tightened in my stomach, but I didn't want to back out. Not after convincing myself this was my chance. Me. Fine. 8 works. You'll let me see it before I pay, right? Seller. Of course. I'm not a scammer, lol. The lol was supposed to put me at ease. It didn't. By the time night rolled in, the streets were half buried in ice. My parents were sitting in the living room, watching television with a fire burning in the fireplace, and I told them I was going to grab food. My dad offered me a 20 and said, "Don't be out too late. Roads are nasty." I pocketed the money, feeling a sharp stab of guilt for lying, but I didn't want to hear the lecture. The drive out to Hillside Mall was silent except for the heater rattling in my beat-up Honda Civic. The streets were deserted, snowflakes swirling in the headlights. Every block I passed felt emptier than the last. When I turned into the mall lot, it was like stepping into another world. The place was dead. A vast expanse of cracked asphalt stretched into the darkness. The old Kmart sign looming overhead, its letters half fallen and stained. And there at the far end of the lot sat a dark car with its headlights off. I slowed, heart thudding in my chest. Someone was leaning against the driver's side door. A man in a hoodie. He raised a hand when he saw me. Casual. Like this was the most normal thing in the world. I parked a good 10 feet away. Engine idling, every nerve in my body telling me to drive off. But then he called out, "You got the cash?" His tone was relaxed, almost bored. I got out trying to mask my nerves. "Yeah, you got the PlayStation?" He jerked his chin toward the back seat. "Right there, check it out." I walked closer, crunch of snow under my boots. The car was older, a beat-up Ford sedan with tinted windows. When I pulled open the back door, I saw a box sitting on the seat. It wasn't sealed. Inside was a console, but it looked wrong. Dusty, scuffed, cables tangled like it had been sitting in someone's garage for years. "This isn't a PS3, I said, frowning. Before I could step back, I felt movement behind me. The man shifted closer, too close. When I turned, he was pulling something from his waistband. A gun. His voice was low, steady. "Hand over the money, now." My stomach dropped. The night air froze in my throat. I could barely breathe. My voice cracked. I thought, "Cash," he snapped. "Don't make this harder." My hands shook as I reached into my pocket. That's when I noticed something else. Through the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the driver's seat. Another figure, crouched low, watching me. This wasn't just a ripoff. It was a setup. And the worst part? I had this gut-deep feeling they weren't going to let me just hand over the cash and walk away. I tossed the envelope into the back seat, hoping that would be enough. "There, take it. I'm gone." But the man didn't step back. He didn't look satisfied. His eyes stayed on me, cold and calculating. That was the moment instinct took over. I spun, bolted toward my car. A crack split the night. The ground kicked up near my feet. A gunshot. I nearly tripped but kept running. Lungs burning, fingers fumbling at the door handle. Another shot rang out, sharper, shattering glass. My rear window exploded into shards. I dove into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and turned the key with shaking hands. The engine roared, tires screeching as I floored it out of the lot. In the rearview mirror, I saw them scrambling into their car, headlights flaring to life. My heart nearly stopped. They were following me. The roads were slick, my car fishtailing as I tore through the snowy streets. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. All I knew was that if they caught up, I was dead. I cut through side streets, blowing past stop signs, praying no other cars were out. Their headlights followed for what felt like forever, closing in whenever I slowed. Finally, I swung hard onto a narrow lane behind the old train station. A shortcut I'd taken 100 times. Their car swerved, struggling to keep up on the ice. For one terrifying moment, I thought they'd gain on me, but then their headlights vanished. Either they'd spun out or given up. I didn't stop to check. I drove straight home, tires crunching into my parents' driveway, chest heaving. Inside, I locked every door, drew every curtain, and sat in the dark, staring at the shattered glass across my back seat. My parents thought I'd just gone for food, but in reality, I'd barely escaped with my life. And the thought that haunted me most wasn't the money I lost. It was this. They hadn't wanted $100. They'd wanted me. And if I hadn't trusted my gut, hadn't run when I did, I don't think I'd be here to tell you this.